Hello guys and welcome back. If you are new around here, I do mostly Australian true crime videos, and today we are doing another solved case. So this is going to be a long one, I'm pretty sure. My notes are so long. It could be a two-parter, I don't think it will be, but just warning you now. I guess you'll find out in the title if it says part 1. If not, I guess just ignore this. Another thing is that it is rainy and stormy outside, and there's not much I can do if you hear rain or droplets. Sorry, it's kind of appropriate for the theme, right? Telling true crime stories, storms. Anyway, let's get straight into today's solved case of the Gonzalez family killings. So we're going to throw it back to the 1980s when the Gonzalez family lived in the city of Baguio. I hope that's pronounced correct. I looked it up. That is the best pronunciation you're going to get out of me. Baguio in the Philippines. The close-knit family consisted of a mother and father, Teddy and Mary Loiva Gonzales, known as Loiva to friends and family, and their 2 children, a boy named Seth and his younger sister by 2 years, Claudine Gonzalez. In the Philippines, the family owned and ran a successful hotel business. That was until the 1990 Luzon earthquake struck the island of Luzon, where their hotel was located, and destroyed the family-run business. Young Seth had actually been trapped in the family's hotel when the earthquake hit, and if it wasn't for the heroic efforts of his father Teddy, he may not have made it out alive. After this traumatic event, the Gonzalez family immigrated from the Philippines to Australia, and then the following year they moved to Sydney in New South Wales, Australia. And at this time, Seth was 10 years old and Claudine was 8 years old. In Australia, Teddy began working as a lawyer. He'd actually been a successful and qualified lawyer in the Philippines, but upon moving to Australia, had to become qualified to work as a lawyer in his new country, which he did. By 1996, Teddy Gonzalez had opened up his own law firm in Blacktown, Sydney, and he actually specialised in immigration law. And his wife, Loiva, was actually his receptionist and secretary. And their law firm went on to be incredibly successful. And this success allowed the family to buy a really beautiful home in the suburb of North Ryde in Sydney. They lived at 6 Collins Street, and if my little knowledge of Sydney is correct, North Ryde is a pretty nice, well-to-do, affluent suburb of Sydney. If you're from Sydney, let me know otherwise, but from the best of my knowledge, North Ryde is a pretty decent area. Plus, looking at this house and the neighbourhood alone, it really is a gorgeous house, and it's huge. The Gonzalez family had really high hopes and dreams for their 2 children, Seth and Claudine, and they hoped that they would both attend university one day, especially hoping Seth would follow in his father's footsteps, practicing law or even going into medicine. Both Teddy and Loiva were strict parents and devout Catholics that did enforce harsh punishments on their children if they disobeyed their parents and didn't live up to their expectations. The Gonzalez parents were well-meaning, however. They just wanted their children to grow up obviously having the best education and being able to live in the best circumstances, and also not wanting to have either of their children struggle as they did when they were young children growing up in the Philippines. And of course, they would love to see their own children reach the level of success that both Teddy and Loiva had managed to gain through their law firm. Seth attended Parramatta High School, where into his last year he performed pretty poorly in his HSC exams, much to the disappointment of both of his parents, because this meant he couldn't apply directly to go into law or medicine. Now, I don't know what the equivalent of HSC is, and I don't even know if it's called HSC in Australia anymore, but basically the exams that give you the opportunity to apply for the colleges you want, like your final school exams that allow you to get into university. I hope that made sense. Seth did eventually go on to fulfill his parents' wishes, enrolling at the University of New South Wales and doing a science degree. And his parents had hoped that doing this science degree would eventually lead him into enrolling in medicine. Despite his poor academic results, Seth was actually a pretty smart kid. He just had no interest in studying or getting good grades at school. His true passion lied in music, which was a pretty big disappointment to his parents. I'm so sorry if you can hear the rain. It is pouring down out there right now, but hopefully it's going to simmer down soon. So unsurprisingly, Seth didn't perform well during his university course, and this did lead him to failing the course. The failure of his course meant Seth faced expulsion for his poor grades, which again was just due to his lack of commitment, not because he wasn't a smart person. And so this actually led Seth to falsifying his university results to his parents, leading his parents to believe he had actually done okay in his first semester of uni. Seth was actually honest with his sister Claudine, however, basically bragging to her about how he'd managed to fool their parents into believing that he had passed his first semester or first year of university. And Claudine herself was really struggling to live up to her parents' expectations. Claudine, who was still in high school, had got into a relationship or had a boyfriend that her parents disapproved of. Her parents more disapproved of the fact she was in a relationship than the boy she was dating, as far as I could understand. Her parents basically believed that having a boyfriend would be a distraction for Claudine, so they actually went to the extreme measure of sending Claudine to live in Melbourne with an aunt so she wouldn't be distracted. Claudine and her boyfriend actually continued a long-distance relationship for a while. That was until Seth actually threatened Claudine's boyfriend, telling him that he was in a gang, and Claudine's boyfriend pretty swiftly broke up with her. So it should be no surprise to you when I tell you that Claudine went straight to her parents to tell them exactly what had happened with Seth at university, that he'd falsified his university results and had actually failed. And his parents, as you can imagine, were incredibly disappointed. So when Teddy and Loiva did find out that their son failed uni and could be expelled, they threatened to take away some of his privileges. And this included his beloved Ford Festiva car and his allowance. You see, although the Gonzalez parents were very strict with their children, they were also very generous with them, buying them things like cars to drive and giving them allowance money so they didn't have to work and could concentrate on their studies. But as generous as they could be, they were very quick to take these privileges away if their children disappointed them in any way. And at the time all of this was going on, Seth himself actually had a girlfriend, an older girlfriend that both of his parents disapproved of. And they also largely disapproved with the fact that she was 4 years older than Seth. His parents believed that, like with Claudine, having a girlfriend was too much of a distraction for Seth during his university studies. Seth's parents went as far as to threaten to disinherit Seth if he continued to see his girlfriend. And just FYI, the family inheritance was worth 1.5 million Australian dollars. However, the girlfriend that Seth claimed to have didn't even consider herself and Seth a couple. She said it was a brief romance and that she'd barely even known Seth. And she pretty quickly got back with her old boyfriend when their brief romance ended, much to the horror of Seth, who believed he was very much in love with this girl. But this girl getting back with her old boyfriend did not stop Seth believing they would get back together, and he went as far as to buy her an engagement necklace. So back to Seth's education, he eventually transferred from the University of New South Wales to Macquarie University, and he changed his degree from a science degree to an arts degree. But he had actually hoped that during this arts degree he could take some law units and eventually transfer to a law degree like his father Teddy. So as I mentioned a few moments ago, Seth was passionate about music and dreamed of success in the music industry. In fact, Seth dreamed of success in many aspects of his life. He wanted to be a successful businessman a successful model and a successful singer. However, Seth was pretty well known amongst friends and family to have a habit of stretching the truth just a little bit when it came to telling people about his many successes in the entertainment industry thus far. For example, Seth told friends that he had a recording contract back in the Philippines and that he was a Calvin Klein model as well back in the Philippines. And this is a bit of an odd point, but at one time Seth actually told his friends that he had cervical cancer, which was completely untrue, but it seemed like it was a move to garner sympathy. Very strange. But even when Seth did stretch the truth / completely lie to friends and family, people kind of disregarded it. They just thought he was young, baby-faced, innocent Seth, and he was pretty harmless, although some people did consider him a bit of a spoiled narcissist due to his privileged upbringing. The daughter of a family friend named Daisy Diaz even set up somewhat of a fan page website to commemorate, I guess is the word, the many successes of Seth Gonzalez, the model, singer, entertainer. The website showed Seth in his underwear and hailed him as the runner-up in Calvin Klein Asia's modeling competition, which was, again, untrue. So now we're skipping forward to July the 10th, 2001. It was a Tuesday, and it was a pretty average Tuesday for the Gonzalez family. Both Teddy and Loiva were at work at Teddy's law firm, and Seth had actually been in the law firm as well, helping his father fix one of the computers. This was pretty common for Seth to go in and help his father. And Claudine was actually home from Melbourne. It was school holidays, so she was at home on this particular day, and she pretty much spent the whole day at home studying. And Seth actually had plans that evening to catch up with a friend. In the evening, which had been a pretty windy and rainy one, not unlike tonight, Sam headed to his friend Sam DeKillo's house at around 8 p.m. Seth then drove the two of them into Sydney City, and they headed to Planet Hollywood to have dinner before heading to a nearby video game arcade where they spent most of the evening playing games. Seth dropped Sam back at his house after the arcade before heading home himself. As he entered his North Ryde home just before midnight, he was greeted by a horrific scene. In his home, on the living room floor, lay the bloodied and lifeless body of Teddy, still in his business suit from that day and clutching his work briefcase. Nearby, Seth spotted the lifeless body of his mother, who was surrounded by groceries that she had dropped during what appeared to be a vicious attack. Seth immediately phoned the police. Seth was hysterical and tearful during the phone call as he tried to explain the situation to the operator. He said, "Please come. Someone is at my parents', killed my family. There is a lot of blood everywhere. Help me. When will they come? I'll play that part of the call for you now."
They're not breathing. What do I do? They're both being shot at, right? I don't know. There's a lot of blood everywhere.
After the phone call to police, Seth says he heard a noise within his home and went to investigate. This is when he spotted two intruders, which he proceeded to chase, but they got away. Seth then ran to his neighbour's house to get help, telling his neighbour, John Atterman, that his parents had been shot. Seth shouted, "Help, John, where are you?" and continued to bang on walls and windows until John emerged. "My parents, my family have all been killed," Seth frantically told John. The commotion managed to wake up several other neighbours in the street, including a man named Shane Hanley, who emerged from his home to find out what all the fuss and commotion was about. Shane found Seth shaking and crying with his head in his hands, sitting on the Gonzalez's garage floor. Both neighbours, Shane and John, were with Seth trying to figure out what had happened that evening when Seth suddenly jumped up and shouted, "I know CPR, I know CPR." before heading into the family home. Shane followed Seth into the house, but upon seeing the state of the bloodied bodies, he knew that CPR would not be able to bring back Teddy and Loiva. Seth began to hover over his father, saying, "Papa, Papa, Daddy, Daddy, Daddy." Shane attempted to pull Seth away from his father's lifeless body, but Seth just ran to his mother's side and started shouting, "Mummy, Mummy, Mummy." Again, Shane did pull Seth away from his mother, but he just then ran back to his father. Police and ambulance did eventually arrive, with armed police entering the house first to establish whether the scene was safe for paramedics to enter into. This was when the deceased body of Seth's youngest sister, Claudine, was discovered upstairs in her bedroom. She was in fetal position and lying in a massive pool of blood. All three family members were deceased upon the arrival of paramedics and police, and they had been for some time. Seth actually asked police for rosary beads after they arrived so he could pray for his family. Upon examining the crime scene, it was established that the first family member to be killed was 18-year-old Claudine, who had been home alone studying in her bedroom when she was attacked at around 4:30 p.m. that afternoon. Claudine had been strangled, struck in the head with a baseball bat or a similar object 6 separate times, and stabbed repeatedly with 1, possibly 2 knives. The knives used in Claudine's attack had been taken from a knife block in the Gonzalez's kitchen and were missing by the time police arrived. An hour later, at 5:30 p.m, 43-year-old Loiva Gonzales arrived home from work with groceries in hand. Loiva was attacked upon entering the home and dropped the groceries. She was stabbed with the same kitchen knives that Claudine had been killed with. She had stab wounds and cuts to her face, neck, chest, and abdomen. Her windpipe had also been slashed during the attack. A little over an hour after this, at 6:50 p.m, 46-year-old Teddy Gonzalez arrived home and faced the same fate as his other 2 family members. Teddy, like his wife, was attacked upon entering his home, and again, like Loiva, he was attacked with the same kitchen knives. He received stab wounds to his right lung, through his heart, and one that partially severed his spinal cord. Teddy, unlike his wife and daughter, did show signs of fighting off his attacker due to defensive wounds across his body. Neither the knives or the thought-to-be baseball bat were found at the scene of the crime. And there was another strange thing that the Gonzalez family attacker or attackers left at the crime scene. And this was some graffiti that they had left on the wall. And the graffiti said, "F off Asians," and near that was written the 3 letters KKK. Now, police from pretty much the get-go believed that this graffiti had been a red herring to make this look like a hate crime towards Asians or the Asian community or the Gonzalez family in general, being that they were immigrants from the Philippines. In the days following the death of Teddy, Loiva, and Claudine, Seth called a press conference where he begged his family's killers to come forward and even offered $100,000 of his family's own money for any information that would lead to the capturing of his family's killers.
I'd like to ask anyone out there to please help us.
Seth spoke at the press conference as well about his family and all the wonderful traits they had, like how generous his father had been, how his mother had been the heart and soul of his family, and how smart and happy his younger sister Claudine was. Seth stated during the press conference, "It is difficult to explain the love and ties in my family, but if you were to picture the 4 corners of the world, in my world, we were the 4. The 3 corners of my world are now gone." At his parents' funeral held on June the 20th and attended by 200 people, including a lot of family that had flown in from the Philippines, Seth again spoke about his parents, reiterating the points that he had mentioned at the press conference. He concluded his speech by singing a song. He sung One Sweet Day by Mariah Carey and Boyz II Men. Now, this performance got mixed reactions. Some saw it as a bit of an awkward and out of place performance and song to be putting in there at his parents' and sisters' funeral, but others felt sympathy for the young, baby-faced Seth that had just lost his entire family. I will play you a short clip now from his singing.
Sorry, I never told you all I wanted to say.
So the police investigation began by looking into the business dealings of Teddy and Loiva Gonzales, just to see if they had any business enemies or anyone that would have a reason to kill them and their family. Initially, a business rival of Teddy's had been suspected as possibly being the perpetrator, but later these emails were found just to be fabrications. Investigators also noted that there was no evidence that someone had broken into the family home, leading them to believe that the Gonzalez family would have known their killer. When investigators began to take a closer look at Seth, and of course, in these situations, police have to look at everybody, including people like Seth, the surviving family member. And when police started talking to Seth, he told them that he believed that the killers had let him live or hadn't bothered to kill him or wait for him when he got home because they wanted to leave one family member alive, so police could pin it on him instead of finding the actual perpetrators. Seth's whereabouts also could not actually be accounted for during the times of the killings, which police had established had occurred between 4:30 p.m. and 7 p.m. Seth claimed on the day of the killings he had been home in the morning before heading to his father's law office. He said he left the law office at around 4:30 p.m. and pulled into his driveway at 6 p.m. But Seth said that when he pulled up, he received a call from his friend Sam, just talking about their meetup that evening. Seth said he didn't actually get out the car, but decided to head straight back out to catch up with another mate before seeing Sam that evening. He said he decided to go to a mate's house named Raph. However, and this makes no sense, and it didn't to investigators either, Seth did not have the phone number or the address of this friend, Raph. So he was driving around aimlessly, according to Seth, until he decided to catch up with Sam at 8 p.m. Although Seth's whereabouts could be accounted for from 8 p.m. onwards, as Sam could verify Seth had been with him, and also there was CCTV footage in the city and the arcade and where they ate out that verified where Seth was. During the times of the actual killings, Seth had no solid alibi. Seth's friend Sam was also questioned about Seth's behaviour that night, but Sam said he was his normal, cheerful and outgoing self, mostly talking about the girl that he had been obsessed with that his parents disapproved of. Nothing seemed off to Sam, but Sam did mention that Seth told him he had been driving around Blacktown that afternoon looking for his friend Raph. A small detail that Sam also mentioned that does become relevant later on was that Sam wasn't eating too much when they had dinner because he had a small bout of food poisoning, or Seth believed he had a small bout of food poisoning because his mother had actually had a really severe bout of food poisoning just days previous. So bad in fact that she'd actually been hospitalized after developing a fever and severe stomach pains. When the doctors looked at the state of Loiva, they said it was just severe food poisoning. She recovered and she went home. Sam also recalled that Seth kept asking to borrow his phone to call his family's home phone, which had apparently been engaged all evening. And Sam said he was calling on his phone to his home phone at about every 15 minutes, and it continued to be engaged throughout the evening. And Sam said that Seth was quite concerned. But when Sam suggested they drive by his family's home to check on them, Seth dismissed the idea. The last notable thing that Sam mentioned to the police was when Seth was dropping him off at his house. When they passed by Seth's house, Seth slowed right down and then just kept driving at normal pace after that. The way in which the Gonzalez family had been attacked also told investigators several things. The level of brutality in the attacks told police that this had been a personal attack, particularly when it came to the brutality that Claudine had suffered. The home invasion had also not been for the purpose of a robbery, and it wasn't a robbery gone wrong because nothing had been taken. There was actually money clearly visible that was left in the house, completely untouched. Then there was the fact that the attackers had entered the home without their own weapons. They had used knives that were already in the Gonzalez family home, in the kitchen, in the knife block. Now, if you were entering a home to brutally kill a whole family, would it not be risky to not bring your own weapons and assume that you could just find something once you'd entered the house? And on top of that, the attacker or the attackers obviously felt comfortable enough to lay in wait in the home for hours, waiting for each family member to arrive home, potentially even knowing their schedules. When Seth was allowed to enter his family's home again after the crime scene had been processed by investigators, he did notice that several things had been stolen. He told police that 3 tracksuits, a leather jacket, a school blazer, and gardening gloves, and his father's runners had been taken. It was noted by investigators that these were very random and specific items to have noticed being missing from your family's home, especially after a traumatic incident like this. As the investigation continued on the Gonzalez family killings, a few more holes began to appear in Seth's alibi from the afternoon in which his family was killed. And one of these holes, I guess, was that several people had seen Seth's green Ford Fiesta sitting in the family's driveway during the hours in which the Gonzalez family was killed. And again, remembering Seth's excuse or explanation as to where he was looking for his friend Raf's house, in which he had no address or phone number for. So that really checked out with police. Police had also not revealed publicly or even to Seth exactly what times his family had been killed. Of course, they had established this by determining the times of the deaths of each family member, but only the police and the killer would know the answer to this. Seth's number plate, SEF, Seth 80G, was also very distinctive, so anyone that went by or dropped by the Gonzalez home was likely to see the Ford Fiesta with the memorable number plate sitting in the driveway. And one of these people that went past was a colleague of Teddy's who noted the car was there. The other witness was Seth's aunt Emily and her son, who dropped by at around 6 p.m. on the night of the killings. Emily had actually gotten out of her vehicle and rang the doorbell, but nobody answered despite the fact that lights were on within the home. After several minutes, Emily peered through the home's frosted glass doors and saw what she thought was a man in a coat and hat. She got her son to peer through as well, but her son assured her that what she was seeing was just a coat rack or a coat stand. Emily began to develop a very uneasy feeling, particularly as she could not hear the Gonzalez's dogs barking, and their dogs would always bark when visitors came around, but it was silent. And it actually turned out that the dogs had been locked in the home's laundry during the attack. killings. Emily stuck around for another 5 minutes, periodically ringing the family's doorbell before making the decision to walk around the side of the home to the family's side door. But Emily said something inside her stopped her from attempting to enter the home. Emily would later go on to say, "I thought maybe someone was home, but something stopped me and I changed my mind. Something just stopped me." After this, Emily and her son walked back to their car and drove away. Emily would later go on to say she wondered what would have happened to herself and her son if she had entered the Gonzalez's family home that evening. When investigators told Seth that his car had been spotted by several witnesses on the afternoon of the killings in his family's driveway, Seth very quickly changed his story. Seth told police that on that afternoon, he'd actually gone to visit a brothel called La Petite Aroma, and he'd left his car at home and caught a taxi there and back. But he had not wanted to admit this to police earlier, as he believed it would bring shame on himself and his family, and embarrassment. He said that his family had believed him to be a virgin. When investigators looked into the brothel alibi, and particularly the sex worker that Seth claimed he spent the afternoon with, it turned out that that particular sex worker had not even been rostered on that afternoon. So there was no way that Seth had spent his afternoon with her. But this did not stop Seth from contacting this sex worker and begging her to cover for him, basically. Seth told the sex worker, "Going there saved my life. I just have to prove it. I need to explain to you in person. Please, I beg you." However, the sex worker refused to meet up with Seth or to cover for him. And of course, Seth did say he caught a taxi to the brothel that afternoon, so investigators followed up with that alibi with that particular taxi driver. And the taxi driver actually confirmed that he had picked Seth up from his North Ryde home and taken him to the brothel. However, when police told the taxi driver that he was being questioned in relations to a triple homicide investigation, the taxi driver very quickly withdrew his statement and told investigators the truth. The taxi driver said that Seth had approached him and offered him $50 to say that he'd taken Seth to a brothel on the afternoon of his family's killings, but of course Seth had told the taxi driver it was just in relation to a minor offence and nothing too serious. The taxi driver told police that he thought baby-faced Seth looked harmless enough, so he agreed to help him out and give him an alibi. Further adding to the fact that Seth was beginning to look like the investigation's prime suspect was the fact that 3 days after the death of his parents and sister, Seth went to visit his family's accountant to inquire about his inheritance. The same inheritance that his parents had not so long ago threatened to take away from him. Not long after these inquiries, Seth put down a $5,000 deposit on a $173,000 Lexus car, telling the dealership that he would pay the rest off once he received his inheritance. In the meantime, Seth made some extra money by trading in both of his parents' cars for a combined total of $68,000 and by pawning off his dead mother's jewelry. Another incident that looked highly suspicious to investigators was the fact that Seth had told a family member that he had a brain tumor and needed to have surgery, which was going to cost him $190,000. Seth had actually contacted a family member in the Philippines asking for the money for the surgery, but luckily she did not give him the money because he didn't even have a brain tumor. Also, during the time since his family's death, Seth had been living in some really nice bougie apartments that were expensive, but they were very safe and secure to live in. And Seth told his family that police had insisted he live in these very secured apartments for his own safety while his family's killer was still on the loose. and his family had actually been covering the cost of renting out these apartments for Seth. But it turned out that police had told Seth no such thing about living anywhere in particular for his own safety. As you can imagine, the Gonzalez family killings were all over the news, all over the media, and people wanted to know why a seemingly upstanding family in a well-to-do suburb had been killed. 3 of their family members had been killed, especially the locals, and the residents of North Ryde wanted to know who had done this and why. Publicly, investigators kept a pretty neutral stance when addressing the public, stating, "Young Seth and his family have cooperated with investigators. We are satisfied with the explanations so far. We are continuing our inquiries. We are keeping an open mind in relation to various lines of inquiry." At 8:30 a.m. on the 1st of April 2002, a man found Seth Gonzalez laying in a gutter in Chatswood with a plastic bag next to him. Seth told the man he couldn't breathe and he needed his father. Seth was taken to hospital where he appeared disorientated and unable to recall his own name. Police did eventually arrive at the hospital to take a statement from Seth to try and figure out what had happened to him. Seth told police he had been stalked and pulled into a vehicle by 2 men. These men told Seth to withdraw the reward money looking for his parents' killers and to stop talking about the crime in the media. Seth said the 2 men then hit him over the head with a plank of wood, put a plastic bag over his head, and threw him into the gutter in Chatswood, where he was found. However, upon an examination of Seth's head, doctors were unable to find any injuries from this apparent attack from the plank of wood. On the 13th of June 2002, almost 1 year after the Gonzalez killings, Seth Gonzalez was charged with 3 counts of homicide and 1 count of threatening product contamination, which I'll explain in a minute. Seth requested that his family's inheritance be used to pay for his defense, and this was a request that was refused. The trial, which was a trial by jury, took place 2 years later between April and May of 2004, and Seth Gonzalez pled not guilty. It was revealed during the trial that the killing of his entire family had been several months in the making for Seth Gonzalez, and he had initially planned to poison them through an elaborate contamination hoax. Seth's internet search history also revealed that he'd typed in methods of killing and had been searching for poisonous plants. And it also showed that Seth had purchased some castor oil seeds, which apparently are poisonous. I had no idea, but I looked them up and they are if you ingest them, so the more you know. The website in which Seth purchased these castor oil seeds off claimed that if you mix them with food, that they would be undetected by the person eating them and would kill somebody within 3 days. And apparently the castor oil seeds would leave no trace in somebody's system of how they were killed. The website also outlined some symptoms of what would occur once a person ingested these seeds, and they mentioned convulsions, severe viral pain, followed by a slow and painful death. Upon receiving the seeds, Seth shelled them, mixed them with warm water, and stored them in a canister under his desk. But unbeknownst to Seth, when police initially had searched his family's home after his parents and sister were killed, they found this canister. Days after Seth made this castor seed oil canister mixture, his mother was diagnosed with severe food poisoning, or at least that's what doctors and the family believed it to be. As I said a few moments ago, Seth was charged with 1 count of threatening product contamination, and this came about because Seth was of course trying to cover up the fact he was trying to poison his whole family. Seth sent an anonymous letter to a major food and beverage company which read as follows: 3 of your products have been poisoned. By now, they are on supermarket shelves. This is what you get for treating employees like garbage. Good luck finding infected cans before someone dies. Go to hell. And Seth also sent similar letters to the Australian Quarantine Inspection Services and the Australian Federal Police, pretending to actually be a concerned employee of this food and beverage company, outlining what he had heard about this product sabotage and the fact that his company he worked for were attempting to cover it up and put lives at risk. However, Seth did not realize that one of the letters he sent out contained one of his fingerprints, which was lifted, stored, and eventually matched up with himself. And of course, when this method of killing his mother through poisoning did not work, Seth Gonzalez resorted to much more drastic measures. So what actually happened on the day his family was killed was that Seth Gonzalez had been at his father's office helping him out, but he actually arrived home between about 4:10 and 4:30 p.m. At 4:30 p.m. he entered his little sister's room with 2 knives from his kitchen. He first strangled her before attacking her with what was thought to be a baseball bat and 2 knives. It's believed that Claudine's attack in particular had been more brutal than their parents because Claudine had dobbed her brother into their parents about him failing university, even though Seth had told Claudine about it. So if he wanted it to be a secret, should he not have kept it from his sister as well? I'm just thinking out loud. Doesn't seem like a smart move. Seth then of course laid in wait for his parents to both arrive home from work and attacked each of them as they walked through the front door. The killings were described in court as that of an angry amateur. The brutality of the killings went above and beyond what was needed to end the life of a human being. It was clear that the killer did not know what they were doing. After the killings, Seth proceeded to dispose of the knives and the baseball bat and to get rid of his clothing and shoes he had been wearing that were now covered in blood. And none of these items have actually ever been recovered as far as I could find. And the way in which investigators knew that the knives from the knife block in the kitchen matched up with the attacks on the family was because they actually found an identical knife block and took those 2 knives that were missing and matched them up with the stab wounds from the Gonzalez family. In court, it was also revealed that blood shoe impressions were left at the crime scene, and they were identified as size 7 human brand shoes. Now, these shoes were not found in the home, but what they did find in Seth's bedroom was a size 7 human brand shoebox. Seth then took a shower, got redressed, and at some point between then and going to visit his friend Sam, he spray painted the words F off Asians and KKK in an effort to create the red herring for investigators, which, as I said, they never really believed was a hate crime. They believed it was a red herring. Unfortunately for Seth, not only did he manage to get some of this spray paint on his clean clothing, which police later identified, but the exact same brand of paint that had been used to write down these, or to spray paint these words on the walls, were found in the family's garage. Again, I'm so sorry, it is raining so loudly. I don't know what the sound must be like. I'm hoping it's not too horrendous. We are almost done. By 8 p.m. that evening, Seth was with his friend Sam and acting like his normal self. And for the record, Sam had no knowledge of his family's killings at all, or Seth's family's killings. It is believed that when Seth slowed down, when he was dropping his friend Sam off, when he slowed down in front of his family's home, he was hoping that someone else would make the gruesome discovery of finding his parents and his sister's bodies, but when he saw no cars or police or ambulance outside of his home, he realized he would have to go home himself and make the gruesome discovery and call the police. Seth then, of course, returned home at 11:45 p.m. and made that call to emergency services. As the truth came out about Seth's involvement in his family's killings, many other lies from different aspects of his life also came out. The Seth Gonzales fan website, run by family friend Daisy Diaz, had in fact been run by Seth Gonzales himself. In fact, Daisy Diaz had never even existed. And of course, this fact doesn't make Seth Gonzales a killer, but it does make him a self-absorbed narcissist. Also, the fabricated, threatening emails that had been sent to his father, Teddy, from a supposed business rival had been written and sent by Seth. And if you hadn't already guessed it, the motive for these killings was money. The $1.5 million family inheritance that Seth would have inherited had he not been the one to kill his own family. Seth had been concerned that failing university not only meant he would lose privileges such as his beloved car, but he would be cut off from the family inheritance. It's believed the reason he also killed his sister Claudine was not only for revenge, but so he was the sole beneficiary of his family's inheritance, the $1.5 million. On the 20th of May 2004, Seth Gonzales was found guilty on all 4 accounts. Seth actually gasped in shock and surprise at the verdict, or as the verdict was read in court, but no one else did. On his 24th birthday, Seth Gonzales was given 3 consecutive life sentences without the possibility of parole, making him one of the youngest people in Australia to be given life in prison. And to this day, Seth still maintains his innocence. And in case you were wondering, because I know myself, I'm always curious about these things, the Gonzales family home is still standing and is occupied. However, in 2004, prospective buyers, a Buddhist couple who'd actually already put down a deposit on the house, only found out about the home's history through a newspaper article, and unsurprisingly, they swiftly withdrew their offer. Due to the bad publicity for the real estate company, which was LJ Hooker, the couple luckily got their deposit refunded. And after this incident, it actually became illegal in New South Wales for a real estate company to sell a home without disclosing if a homicide or similar crime had taken place within the home. The home did eventually sell the following year for $720,000, which was $80,000 less than the original sale, but the buyer was very much aware of the house's history. Don't quote me, but I think it is either law or at least common practice for real estate companies to actually disclose if a home has had a homicide history or similar. And I imagine it will be very bad publicity given, given social media these days for a real estate company to sell a home without disclosing the full details of its background. I know for myself, I actually went to the home open of serial killers here in Perth, David and Catherine Burney. Their home is somehow still standing after years and years and years. It needs to be knocked down, but that's a whole nother story. And on the kitchen table of their home, the real estate company had left a note. I'll put it on the screen, but it said, "In the interest of full disclosure, Yard Property has a duty to inform potential applicants that this property was once the residence of David and Catherine Burney." I don't know about you, but I found that quite interesting, and I find it quite interesting that it did become a law in New South Wales after this incident. But anyway, thank you so much for being here. Thank you for listening to the stories of Loiva, Teddy, and Claudine. Don't forget to like, comment, subscribe, share, yada yada. Follow me on social media. I never ask anyone to do this, but follow me if you want to have updates throughout the week on videos, cases, etc. I'll put it on screen, but it's just _ Samantha Melanie, one word with no E on the end. Until next time, stay vigilant, stay safe, and I will see you soon.